Welcome to this video about rate limit policy, policy provided by Kuadrant. We will show how easily you can rate limit and in general protect your services on Kubernetes. And in the end, we will run a demo so you can see in a local cluster how RateLimit works using an application owned by Red Hat, which is called Epicurio registry. We will see how relimiting can be enabled for the Epicurio registry. So let's go for it. So Kuadrant, what is Kuadrant? Kuadrant is basically a middleware application for Kubernetes services. It's Kubernetes native in the sense that it extends the API of Kubernetes to provide the functionality and capabilities. And it's a middleware application because it stands between the gateway and your services and provides protection to your services. Think about protections on terms of authentication, which is the identity verification. It provides functionality for authorization, which basically it's the verification of the permissions that the request is claiming, and also the rate limiting. We are in this presentation, we are going to focus on the rate limiting part and the rate limiting policy, which is how Kuadrant expose the functionality to the users to be used, the policy. So rate limiting policy, it's implemented as a custom resource. The Kuadrant extends Kubernetes API defining a custom resource definition, which is the rate limit policy. So users can create objects of this definition, which are called custom resources. And this is in the diagram, you can see the high level overview of the rate limit policy, which has at top level has two objects. One is the reference, a target reference, which basically says where this rate limiting policy should be applied, the scope of the rate limit policy, and what, which is the configuration of the rate limit itself. We are going to focus now on the where, which is targeted. What kind of things can I target in my rate limit policy? Here I need to talk a little bit about the Gateway API. The Gateway API is an open source project managed by the Network Special Interest Group. So it defines a set of a set of resources with a hierarchical structure in order to configure and to specify routing in Kubernetes clusters. So the rate limit policy currently only focus on two resources of the Gateway API. One is the gateway, which is usually managed by the cluster operators, and the other is the HTTP route, which is managed by the application developers or the API providers. So the cluster operator define rules on the gateway for all the traffic going through that gateway, and the application developers or the API providers define the rules of the routing rules to get that traffic from the gateway to its own service. So the rate limit policy can target gateways or HTTP routes. And this diagram tries to illustrate that usually we have an infra namespace where the gateway lives, and we can have a rate limit policy targeting a gateway, meaning that all the rules from that rate limit policy will apply, potentially can apply to all the traffic at the gateway. Whereas rate limit policy can also target or be scoped to the HTTP route, and the rate limit policy rules will be scoped, restricted to the traffic being defined by the HTTP route. Things like the traffic domain names, uh, traffic attributes like paths, like HTTP methods, headers, things like that. You can define rate limit rules based on traffic attributes. Let's go a little bit in detail, a little bit more in detail about the rate limit policy. So the spec, what can you specify in the spec of the rate limit policy? As I said earlier, there are two things at the top level, two objects at the top level. First one is the target reference, and as we just have been talking about, the target reference can be either a gateway or an HTTP route that defines the scope of the rate limit. Rate limit, again, rate limiting targeting a gateway can potentially, if you want, apply rate limiting to all the traffic going through the gateway. Usually, deploying a rate limit policy in the gateway requires permissions where the gateway lives. So this is usually requires cluster administrator permissions. Obviously, as an API provider, you cannot define rate limiting for all the traffic at the gateway. If the gateway is shared, if you own your own gateway, you can do it, of course. So one of the top level object is the HTTP route, and the other is the where I said earlier, what rate limit policy rules can I apply? So it's actually a list of configurations. I can apply a list of configuration, and let's see what each configuration can contain. There are two parts of the configuration is composed of two parts. One is the gateway configuration. The rate limiting happens at the gateway. Even though the rate limit policy is targeting the HTTP route, which means the scope of the rules are for only that traffic, the real rate limiting happens at the gateway. So we need some configuration at the gateway. And this part of the configuration goes to the gateway. The other part goes to the rate limiting service. This is an external rate limiting service. This is a configuration that goes to that external rate limiting service that in Kuadrant is implemented by Limitador. And there we also need to configure some bits. Going back to the gateway configuration, we can define traffic matching rules, things like domain names, things like paths, HTTP methods. We can define what is called rate limiting descriptors. Rate limiting descriptors is something defined by the well-known Envoy rate limiting service protocol. I'm not going into much detail about this, but this is a well-known API. So we decided to use it to define rate limiting rules. And at the rate limiting service configuration, we define the real limits. Well, not real, the limits, which is, for example, 1,000 requests per day, 20,000 requests per month, things like that. And also some conditions and variables, which are matching rules against rate limiting descriptors sent by the gateway. The gateway and the HTTP route can be referenced by multiple rate limiting protocols, rate limiting policies. So when a request hits the gateway, which is the rate limiting policy being applied? Currently, we have implemented very easy and very easy concept, very easy way to understand the conflict when multiple rate limited policies match the request, which is all the rate limit policy are going to be applied. There is no way currently to define to enable or disable rate limit policy. As long as the rate limit policy exists, it will be applied, meaning that the configuration will go to the gateway, and some bits will go to the gateway, some bits will go to the rate limiting service. However, what's the effective rate limiting? Well, that depends on the request. That's request basis, meaning that if a request is matched by multiple, more than one rate limiting policy, a very easy concept will apply. The most restrictive policy will win. Let's see a little example to illustrate this. Let's say that in a gateway, a rate limit policy states that all traffic with post HTTP method will be rate limited to 1,000 requests per day. And at the HTTP route level, there is another rate limiting policy which says all the post traffic to the admin endpoints will be rate limited to 500 requests per day. So which one will apply? Well, that depends on the request. If the request says get toy, then the no rate limit policy is matched, so the effective rate limiting is none. When the request is post to /toy, there is only one matching rate limit policy, which is the one targeting the gateway. So the limits of that rate limit policy will apply, which is 1,000 requests per second. And the last one, which is a last request, which is post to admin endpoint, we have two matched rate limit policies, the gateway and the HTTP route, which is the effective rate limit in the most restrictive ones. And in this particular case will be 500 requests per second. Time for the demo. Let's see. Let's see how to apply rate limiting on one application. In this particular case, will be the API Courier registry. The API Courier registry. Let me show you the API Courier registry. The API Courier registry is a store of API schemas called artifacts. Could be different. It supports different types of schemas. Here we are going to work with OpenAPI spec. Could be otherwise, but we are going to work with the OpenAPI spec. And we can upload our artifacts, our versions of the OpenAPI spec. So I can upload a new version of the API spec here. Let's see if I can make it bigger so you can see it. Some API spec for my bookstore API. And if I upload it, it's done. There is no rate limiting. No, let's go back to the presentation. Step 0. There are 3 steps, so it won't be long. Step 0 is no rate limiting. There is a gateway. This is all in a local cluster. There is a gateway called Istio Ingress Gateway, because the Istio is the gateway API provider. So Istio deploys a Envoy gateway called Istio Ingress Gateway. And in the API Courier registry namespace, we define an HTTP route. It's already there in place. That's why you could see the application here. and then the traffic goes from my browser, hits the gateway, and the gateway configured by the HTTP route is being the request is being routed to the service, AP Courier's registry service. So there is no rate limiting here. I can push or I can upload as many artifacts as I want. 1, 2, 3, no issue. So let's start applying some rate limiting. We will apply some rate limiting at the gateway level. So I am a cluster administrator. I cannot apply as the owner of Epicurio registry service or any other service. I cannot apply rate limiting at the gateway level. I don't have permissions. But as a cluster administrator, I can apply rate limiting to the gateway. And for this particular case, for the sake of the demo, I can say that all the traffic with the post HTTP method is really expensive. So I will rate limit to all the post traffic to two requests every 20 seconds. So let me show you how to apply rate limiting. I only need, and this is the important thing I want to highlight, I only need to create a custom resource. So I create a custom resource in the I am in the namespace where the gateway lives, which is Istio system, and I create the custom resource object for the rate limiting policy. Rate limiting policy called global settings in the namespace Istio system. The target reference is the gateway, and not going into detail, but basically we see here all those bits of information I explained earlier. But the important thing is that is two requests every 20 seconds. And the rules for the traffic is all the traffic that the HTTP method is passed will be rate limiting to those limits. So if I apply this, let's see if it takes few seconds to propagate all the configuration, but we can see the global setting rate limiting policy in the status of the custom object. It says the condition is available, so it should be already there. Let's go to the Epicurio registry and let's try. I remember that it's two requests every 20 seconds. So I go to upload one new asset, or it's called artifact in Epicurio registry. Okay, it's some OpenAPI spec. So it's a second one, I'm allowed to do this. And when I try a third one before 20 seconds expire, I get an error. If I see the error, it says too many requests. I get 429, which is usually the error status code for when the limits are exceeded. So if I try again and the 20 seconds have expired, I can upload again at only two requests every 20 seconds. The third one will fail. So step one is done. We have added some rate limiting policy, just creating a custom resource. For step two, I'm the API provider, the owner of the service, Epicurio service, so I have full permissions on my namespace. And I want to rate limit the uploading assets, because every time I upload an asset, my database consumes a lot of resources. So I want to rate limit for that. So my rate limit policy will state that all the pushes, all the uploads, which is a post HTTP method to this endpoint, I will rate limit to one request every 20 seconds. So let's do that. Again, as an API owner, I go to my namespace Epicurious registry, and I create an array limit policy for my service that will only apply to my traffic, to the Epicurious registry traffic. The array limit policy is called Epicurious registry. Why not? It targets the HTTP route. I'm saying that I don't want to rate limit all the traffic, only uploads of assets, which is a post to this endpoint, and the limit will be one request every 20 seconds. One request every 20 seconds. If I create it, I check the status of that object. The status says that it's available, so it should be in place, the rate limiting. It's interesting to note here that you are applying a rate limit policy to your HTTP route. However, your rate limiting could be affected by the rate limiting at the gateway level. So in the status of the rate limiting policy, it tells you other rate limiting that could affect your traffic. So you have some idea of what is being done that could affect your rate limiting. You know for sure that your traffic won't get more than one request every 20 seconds, but could be less than that because of other rate limiting applied at the gateway level. In this particular case, the most restrictive one is the one at the route level, so it should be one. Let's go and check if it's one or not. If I reload it and I upload some assets, artifact, one is allowed, second one is not allowed. The rate limiting at the HTTP route is effective. 429, too many requests. That's the step 2 done. And the last step of the demo is a change in the rate limit policy at the HTTP route level. Let's say that the API owner got many complaints from users saying your service cannot be used, the user experience is horrible, we cannot upload our artifacts. So the API owner decides to relax a little bit the rate limit policy. Instead of one request every 20 seconds, it will relax to 3 requests every 20 seconds. Okay. Interestingly enough, is that this new rate limit policy, these new rules, this new limit, the effective rate limiting is not 3, will be 2, because the rate limit policy at the gateway level is more restrictive. So instead of 3, it will get 2. So this is another topic, another issue. The API owner of Epicurious registry should complain the gateway administrator and said your rate limiting is too low. Or too restrictive. But this is another issue. We provide tools. How tools are being used is another topic. So let's see how to apply this update from one rate request every 20 seconds to 3. So we go to our rate limiting in Epicurious. We are going to edit. I don't need to create a new one. I need to edit the one. I go to the spec, and where it says one request every 20 seconds, I will set 3 requests every 20 seconds. I need to update. Okay. So if I check this again, status says true. It's 3 every 20 seconds, and the gateway rate limit says it's 2 instead of 3. So the effective rate limiting will be 2 instead of 3. Let's see if the change is being propagated. Wait a second, it needs a few seconds to propagate. Not yet. It's not that. It's not yet. The time, the configuration are being propagated in few seconds, but where we need to wait is a config map is being changed. That config map is mounted in a process, in a pod. And when you change the config map, the time taken from we change the config map to reflect the changes in the mounted files sometimes takes a little bit of time. Let's see. Now the change should have been propagated. So the picture is the HTTP route is rate limited to 3 requests every 20 seconds, although the gateway says 2 requests every 20 seconds. So it should be, the effective one should be 2 requests every 20 seconds. If I go to the Epicurio registry, I try to upload 1, 2, and the third one is failing because only 2 are allowed. The rate limiting happens at the gateway level. And that's all. Thanks for watching the video, and stay tuned for new features from Kuadrant. There you have the URL. Feel free to add your issues, contributions, anything you want. Drop an issue. We will be very happy to answer and discuss. And also check out the Kuadrant YouTube channel for more videos about Kuadrant. Thank you very much. Let's see if I'm able to